Questions from the audience, please. I'm going to Friday afternoon question.
Maybe I could just make a comment about the natural versus synthetic and the materiality of that, and the colors might be the same. And when a fresh yellow lake is made, it's incredibly bright, but it's mordanted, and the synthetic dyes were not mordanted, so they couldn't be washed. And as soon as you washed your clothes, the color would start bleeding out. So its sense of value and permanence was then associated with the natural mordanted dyes. So it's not just the light fading, but it's washing. When you're dealing with the intention of looking at textiles in that role and where quality might come in. Just a thought.
Of course, on the textiles, we should also talk about how often those would be washed after cleaning. So a lot of the, especially high-end textiles, would not be washed that often. But issues of fugitivity and other sort of apply.
It does mean that when you're doing a treatment, you might want to know.
Something that's come up in my readings about costume from the period is that often people would have negative interactions with these new pigments and dyes in the sense of them coming off on the person rather than coming off in the laundry, or having allergic reactions to these new materials as well. And I think that's part of the perception that these were somehow inferior materials too.
I just wanted to ask Marco why we don't know when ultramarine blue came to Japan, and what did it first start showing up in, and why is it unclear?
I think chiefly because nobody has looked hard enough. The problem is that the accurate dating of prints through a certain system of censorship is valid only for the Meiji period. So when you look at the Edo period, you could look at a very successful print that has been reprinted later. These are not multiple editions in the sense that we know now. They could have, as long as you have the blocks, you could print, and you could even recut the blocks. So we do not know. What we know is that, at least from my analysis and others, the late Edo period seems to be where you start seeing ultramarine. But then it's a matter of saying, did it come in through the Dutch trade in Nagasaki? Is it coming with ship trade through Yokohama after the American intervention? That it would be very nice to see, because that's really a watershed.
I just have a question about the orpiment. I presume it's synthetic orpiment that you're finding.
It's arsenic sulfide glass, so it is orpiment ore that's been heated, distilled, and essentially quenched to the non-crystalline state. Mark Vermeulen wrote about that in his dissertation. We found it here, and Mark, are you here?
Yeah, I know the publication.
You can address that, because there's also more interesting stuff that's happening, so that would be kind of interesting to see when it's published.
Oh, I was just going to remark further on the introduction of ultramarine to Japan. You're talking specifically about printmaking, right? I mean, we find ultramarine earlier, scarce amounts of it, don't we, in Buddhist painting?
Okay, so there's some ultramarine. This is, of course, synthetic ultramarine, right? So we're talking about synthetic ultramarine, laundry bluing, French ultramarine, Edo, late Edo, early. We have these prints. We have a few drawings by Hiroshige second. There are some real lapis in tomb paintings. So it's very early stuff. So silk root thing that came into the Heian period, but it's just like very, very old. So there's no other ultramarine in Edo, Momoyama, any scroll, hand scroll. 0.
So now that you're looking at dye-based color through the prints, are you planning on extending the research to look at the actual Japanese textiles in your collection?
No.
Can I ask another question? Okay. Can I ask about the difference between color and materiality, and maybe Tim? Because I understand there was a trade in iron ochre that would go over 1,000 kilometers, for example. So I'm curious about whether the color that's associated with burial is the color, or whether there is a material value that's specific to that particular ochre. Does anybody have any idea?
What I know that with Mungo Man was that ochre came over 200 kilometres away.
It did, wow.
So there is a significance to the transport in terms of how there's a lot of ochre transport that was we had a talk at the Global Conference about the transport of ochre, so it is seen as a significant commodity rather than localised.
And not maybe just the color, but value added because it's scarce? Do we know? No, it's 40,000 years ago.
Yeah. So that's the thing. There's a lot of opportunity to make things up in between, but I think that's the value is this. So this is where with Indigenous people, when a geologist manages to say that's come from 200 kilometres away, then that's great. That's the kind of information they want to know because it's valuable to them about communication and transport. So it's very selective how data is used, and that's how it's become so complicated for the bones of Mungo Man, because the bits of data that they choose to want to know about and others don't want to know about is complex.
I had a question for you about the survival of objects. I was fascinated by your statement. Only 1,000 of these survived. I was thinking, my God, there's 1,000 of these objects. I thought that was amazing. And I wanted to know, do you attribute that to looting in the 19th century?
So what we do know from Petrie excavations, on find sites, there's about 1 in 100 mummies that would have one of these portraits. So they were not for everyone. So it's difficult to say whether it's looting or just production numbers. I'm sure there's been a lot of looting for sure. You can't deny that. But that, in terms of quantity, that's the best guesstimate that I would have for production.
So actually, Glenn, I really liked your paper because this idea of recycling.
Upcycling.
Upcycling.
Yeah, taking waste and using it for...
Yeah, as a concept of active matter, I think is a very powerful concept. And this is something that was really at play in the Roman world. I mean, I've written about the upcycling of lead oxide to be able to make red lead. I think Mark Abbey talked about finding mimetite associated with mining sites and metallurgy. These are all, the pigments were the residual products of industry writ large in the Roman world. I'm wondering whether you could talk a little bit about what value you would assign to the type of pigments that were used, the type of expression, the artist's output, and the use of these upcycled materials.
So on the mummy portrait I studied, these are purple clavi, and of course purple has this cachet in the ancient world. That is most people recognize. However, by about 150 AD, we have all ranks of society taking the purple. So slaves wearing purple robes, I guess, to enhance the status of the families that they were associated with. So I think in the time frame that I was looking at, 100, 200 AD, the purple color is 100 years before that, you still have the laws of the dueling families that only nobility could be associated with that color. So things change, and they can change quickly.
I have a question actually, just out of sheer ignorance about the palette in this time period. At the same time, was Tyrian purple available and just not being used, or is this just another way to make this color that we didn't know about yet?
Right, I believe it was available, absolutely, but so costly. A ton of mollusks needed to be used to extract a gram of the murex material. This possible color shift of cheap matter may have been a way to bring that color to many different peoples.
So you've never found an example of Tyrian purple on one of these mummy portraits?
I have not. I have not heard of anyone else that has.
So a question for Tim in terms of your work at the university. How do you find that, I mean, we've seen how, people during the G20 summit are responding to these paintings and them coming out and going away. How do you find the students reacting to these issues? Do you feel like we have, on the one hand, something being published in 2017 that seems remarkably obtuse and that you showed, but yet I would hope that people coming up are thinking differently.
There's far more education about Indigenous history in schools. There is a gap. I think that if you're 25 or younger, then you will have had a curriculum in school that was compulsory about Indigenous, but not shoved in your face in a way that was sort of more palatable. Those who are in power have not had that, and that area is particularly fraught at the university by bringing along cultural awareness. It's one of the things, though, like health and safety training, which is mandatory. I don't make the cultural awareness mandatory, but when I get to the point with my previous institution, I got to the point of 85% staff having done it because I wanted the staff to do it first. I then get to the 15% who have not done it and ask them why. To understand why, and they often say that it's not their priority, and I say, well, it's my priority. So, and unfortunately, my priority is now your priority. And, through that, there's a movement in Australia that all courses, all degree programs will have Indigenous content of knowledges, and it's very different between having the idea of sort of, these people over here did this, whereas actually knowledge requires of ways of knowing and doing it requires an appreciation. And people don't understand what's coming. And I've just lived in Australia for 6 years now, and it keeps on getting cancelled. In 2015, all courses will have Indigenous knowledges. In 2016, all courses will have Indigenous knowledges. In 2018, all courses will have Indigenous knowledges. And it's because the staff haven't done cultural awareness. If you begin to get the staff to do cultural awareness, then the courses, they want to put this Indigenous content into the courses. So it's a long haul, and there's a fear. There's a fear of getting things wrong. There's a fear of, when I'm standing up there, I was thinking, I meant to say at the end, am I making my career on the back of Indigenous peoples by giving you this talk today? There's a kind of it's like, it's whether you've actually done more damage than you haven't, and I hope I haven't done more damage, but it's not for me to judge, if that makes sense.
Question for Matthew then, to start it from this point. You had some moments in your talk where you mentioned going to pair seals, the documents, to the bodies that we find in the cemetery. So, of course, I guess in the West, with our own dead, we have a different attitude, although we could argue that people died in the year 1000 in England are culturally not the same as Anglican, Episcopalian, modern year, or whether they're Norse or Saxon. Do you think about that, and what do you aim to know about these people if collectively and individually?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting question, and of course, there, as you point out, there are the sense of the historic imperative in a sense whereby if you have people before the Christian era, you see different burial practices than you do post the Christian era, and what we're seeing now is a lot of interest amongst a broad swathe of the general public in what we can learn from the remains from these sites. So the reason I referred to that example particularly was because there's a new high-speed train link which is going to go through the centre of the UK. Inside of Stoke Mandeville, there's a church, and it's going to go through the graveyard, so all of the burials will be disturbed. And a proposal has been put forward to genetically type every individual graveyard. And because of that, I actually went through the documentary sources to see how many seals we have from individuals from the Stoke Mandeville period over the last 1,000 years to see what the probability would be if it worked. So there is there is one group associated with burials in Stonehenge who have been arguing against some of the cremated remains, and there's a series of burials actually outside the main structures, and there have been debates about who has the rights to bury those, because you have a group of individuals who identify with the civil burial practice from the past. But outside of that group, at the moment, broadly, there's a lot of interest in understanding the genetic makeup and structure of the peoples of Britain, and of course, because it is